I'm Eric Marcus, and this is Making Gay History. In this episode, you're going to meet another of my heroes whose name has been lost to history. Herb Selwyn was a knight in shining armor for the fledgling LGBT civil rights movement on the West Coast. He was an attorney from Southern California who had no personal stake in fighting for the rights of gay people. But he couldn't turn the other way and stood up for LGBT folks during the years when other straight attorneys cashed in on the persecution of gay people, and gay attorneys were too fearful, and with good reason, to stick their necks out for a despised minority. At the time, Herb had no idea how many lives his work would touch, or what his foundational contributions to the early movement would mean to the people he loved best. When Herb gave me his address in the Studio City neighborhood of Los Angeles, it sounded familiar. And sure enough, he lives around the corner from my friend and fellow author, Betty Berzon. I pull into the driveway of a classic, single-story, flat-roofed, mid-century house with a few palm trees in the front yard, and before I reach the Spanish-style double front doors, Herb is there to greet me. Herb's a little guy in glasses who makes me feel very tall, and I'm not tall. And he makes me feel welcome. We get set up in Herb's study. I clip my microphone to his light blue jumpsuit and press record.
Interview with Herb Selwyn, Thursday, August 24th, 1989. Location is Los Angeles, California. Interviewer is Eric Marcus. Tape 1, Side 1.
My parents were never homophobic. They explained to me that, some people have different predilections than others. And, the good old story that Socrates said about the people being paired up, and because of the disobedience, the gods had scattered them, and they're still searching for their mate, a woman for a woman, a man for a man, a woman for a man, so on. And we knew that there were, for example, gay bars in the area. Then during the war, I remember a young soldier was arrested and sentenced to a lot of years because he'd had a relationship with a teenage English boy, and I told the major that I thought it was rather unjust that he get that much time, and because the kid was willing and all that, and that he should be sent for psychotherapy instead. And the major made some nasty crack about, well, you guys ought to go out and psychoanalyze each other or something like that. And
Did he just assume you were one of them?
Oh, no. He knew I wasn't, but he just felt it was improper for me to take up for them because he felt he's one of these guys that thought, well, this is beyond the pale.
Wasn't that sticking your neck out?
Oh, I've always stuck my neck out. I never bothered about that. I probably was not the most disciplined soldier in the armed forces there, because I always said what I thought, and I didn't care to whom I said it. I still don't. I talk too much sometimes. At any rate, after finishing law school, I opened practice, and must have been about 3 years later, my father told me about this woman that when my dad had mentioned that I was a lawyer. She said, I belong to a group called the Mattachine Foundation, I think it was then, and I wondered if he'd give a talk to us. And so my dad asked, and I said, certainly. So I checked sections 286 and 288A and 647.5 as it was then, and the various statutes that might affect people committing homosexual acts.
And what did you find?
Now, the same would be heterosexual acts. In other words, Section 286 is having sexual relations with an animal or a man through the anus. Not animal or man through the anus, so there's a semicolon there,
Right.
And, of course, that includes women, a man with a woman.
According to the New York Times, they'd have to arrest 20% of heterosexual couples in America today.
Oh, yes, of course. Right. And 288A involved oral copulation, copulating the private parts of one with the mouth of another. So it also could affect heterosexuals. Very few heterosexuals were ever arrested for that.
The meeting you went to, was it at someone's home? Was it a large group of people?
No, I believe it was a home, and I don't think there were probably more than about 25 or 30 people.
Men and women?
Group. Men and women, yes. Mm-hmm. In those years, men and women were very pleasantly together, and there weren't the schisms that there turned out to be later.
How did they receive you?
Oh, I was very well received. Very well received because, you see, in those years, there were no homosexual lawyers at all. They were all very deeply in the closet. In fact, they were so deep that most of the people that represented gay organizations, as opposed to criminal cases, were straight.
Wasn't there some risk for you professionally to get involved with Mattachine? Danger in terms of losing clients, danger in terms of FBI investigation?
Well, interestingly enough, the only time that they got upset is when I wrote a little card called Know Your Legal Rights, which was sort of folded over, and I wrote it, and I think Mattachine or someone distributed it to the bars. And, it said basically what your rights are, and they probably found this in the wallet of one of the people that was arrested. And this friend of mine, a classmate, in fact, who was with the city attorney's office, the prosecutor at that time, showed it to me. He says, "Isn't this awful? Isn't it horrible?"
Why was it
and
horrible?
I looked at it, and I didn't tell him I wrote it. I said, "Well, look, are any statements of law there that are incorrect?" He says, "No, but telling people they don't have to talk to the police." This was before Miranda. And I said, "Well, if that's their rights, don't you think they have the right to know their rights?" That guy just got peeved at me and walked away.
Why was a document like that necessary, that kind of little card?
Well, a lot of people didn't know they didn't have to talk to the police. They didn't have to admit anything. They could ask for a lawyer before saying anything.
What year was this, approximately?
Oh, probably in the late 50s. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine, when he wanted a top-secret clearance for a job in Defense Factory, he was an engineer, I used my name, and the FBI came and interviewed me, and they said, "Well, we understand you formed the Mattachine Corporation." And
how did the FBI, when they came to ask you questions about this friend of yours, how did they know you had been involved in Mattachine?
Oh, they probably keep a dossier on me. They keep dossiers on everyone. Under J. Edgar Hoover, who was, in spite of whatever he was himself, seemed to be quite a homophobe when it came to others, probably wanted the organizations that were formed checked into. And this was a corporation incorporated in California in, I believe, 1954, and I think was the first gay organization incorporated.
In the United States?
Yes. I mean, the thing is, I know they someone once went to another lawyer, and he wanted $25,000 to incorporate. I did it free. He told me that much later. In addition to being involved in gay movements, I was involved with the Watts riots. I defended a lot of people there in...
what year was that?
1968, I believe. And then in the early 70s, the Chicano moratorium, where I defended a lot of people that were involved in that movement. So I feel that the only sadness I see is that these minorities don't get together in a human liberation movement rather than fighting each other, which unfortunately is what does happen.
Which groups do you mean?
Oh, the Latino groups, the gay groups, the black groups, the Jewish groups.
During the time that you were representing gay people, what did you see as the legal landmarks in gay rights law?
The legislature in 1961 changed the law from the old lewd vagrancy statute, where you could be arrested, any lewd or dissolute person could be arrested for as a vagrant. That's a status offense. And in 61 it was changed where you actually had to do something. You had to commit a lewd act. And then later, the famous consenting adult statutes, that what consenting adults do in private is no longer illegal. If you do it in a public place or with children, it's still illegal, you see. But doing it in a public place is now a misdemeanor instead of many of them being felonies. And that was probably one of the big advances. Then the attitude, of course, of society, I'll never forget, they try to revoke a license of a hairdresser, a cosmetologist, for being gay.
What year, around when?
Oh, that was, again, probably in the late 50s. And I tried that, and I won the case at the administrative hearings.
What was the nature of the case?
Well, that he was a homosexual, and therefore he should be stripped of his cosmetologist license. So I asked the administrative law judge, whom I knew was married, that he should ask his wife how many of the male hairdressers she goes to she feels might be gay. And I just sort of jokingly asked him how all of our wives and girlfriends would look if all of the gay hairdressers had their licenses revoked. He chuckled at that one, and very amusing. Of course, we're not for the poor guy whose license is at stake, because, he had a nice little shop, and it would have meant if he lost his license, it would have, wreaked a great deal of harm to him and to people that depended on him.
So you worked for nearly 20 years.
Probably, yes. And I took the Black Cat case up the Supreme Court, not successfully.
What was the Black Cat case? Can you tell me a little bit about
yes,
that?
there were a fairly large number of persons arrested at a bar called the Black Cat because they were kissing the New Year in.
So the case was a group of people were arrested for kissing on New Year's Eve.
Right. Some of them really got beaten badly afterwards. Some of them, in fact, one guy lost his spleen because he got beaten so badly by the police. Police, do sometimes or did sometimes go in for gay bashing. They don't anymore because the gay movement now has strength. They have gay judges now and even gay policemen. One of the other victories we had is the Christopher Street West Parade. The police commission denied a permit to the committee. I believe that was 1970, 71.
I think it was 70.
They wanted $1 million bond in case anybody threw rocks at them.
What was the permit requested for?
To have a parade on Hollywood Boulevard. They had the Christopher Street Parade in New York, and they wanted a Christopher Street West parade here, and they set up a committee. So they refused to give them the permit unless they had all kinds. They want them to pay for police protection. They want them to put up a bond, all sorts of expenses. Police protection is something that the citizens are entitled to be protected in the exercise of their constitutional rights. If some people get annoyed by it and throw stones at them, it's up to police to arrest the stone throwers and not to prevent the marchers from marching. And from then on till today, they've been marching every year. And the parades have been getting bigger and better.
Did you march in that original parade? Were you there at the parade?
I was there, oh yes. In fact, they also had, I remember one of them, I took my eldest daughter, and to get her acclimated to people that others might not agree with, so to speak, just like I took her to black and Latino rallies.
Just as your parents set the tone for you in your views about others.
Yes, that's right.
You've done the same.
You've got to do that.
Given all the work you've done for gay rights groups and gay people over the years, I call this my Barbara Walters question. What do you see as your greatest contribution in that effort?
I think probably the greatest contribution was the pioneering efforts, that when straight lawyers weren't interested in it, and gay lawyers were afraid to take it up, I was able to at least get a start in the organizations going. And I think that I may have been one of the pioneers. I mean, without flattering myself, I think that's a statement I can make.
Anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to comment on?
I think you've covered it very well. You're really a very fine oral historian.
Thank you.
You know.
Thank you. I'm going to clip that piece of tape and save it and play it back
Sure,
on my
well.
bad days.
I was really touched by what Herb said about my interviewing skills, but back in 1990 when I transcribed the interview, I wasn't so happy with myself and typed myself a note. I wrote, "If you had paid more attention to being a good interviewer, you might have asked him what motivated him to help gays." I kicked myself for not asking that, but then it occurred to me I could ask Herb's daughter, Jennifer. I spoke to Jennifer the first time in February of 2016 when she called and introduced herself. I figured it wasn't good news. But there was more that Jennifer wanted to share with me than the fact of her father's recent death. So I invited Jennifer to be a part of this episode. Jennifer, what year were you born?
I was born in 1962, and I'm the youngest of the 4 children.
So do you remember your dad's work with gay groups?
I do. I was fairly young at the time. Mostly I remember his ill-fated campaign for Congress in the Democratic primary in 1974. I was a little bit under 12 at the time, and as a part of supporting his campaign, I was around some gay groups, and also as a very young person went to my first Pride March.
Do you remember what year you went to your first Pride March with your dad?
Yeah, that would have been in June of 74. So I was a little shy of 12 at the time.
Do you remember your impressions of it?
I was pretty overwhelmed. I'm not sure, whether that was because of my age or just the general outrageousness of it all. But my eyes were wide, I can tell you that.
Do you have some sense of what motivated your dad in the first place?
He really was somebody that I think my grandparents, as he mentioned, were very open-minded people. They taught him that you don't judge other people and that you stand up for people who are being bullied. I think my father also said, and it was certainly true of him, that he never knew when to keep his mouth shut, and I think of that in a really good way. He really believed in speaking up for people who needed someone to champion them, and I think that drove him in many ways, not just in his legal career, but in his life, and I truly consider that one of the greatest gifts that he gave to us. I certainly value that every day.
How did your dad react to your being gay?
I came out to him when I was about 19. I think that, while anybody is nervous coming out to their parents, the fact that my dad had this whole history and legacy of being involved in supporting gay rights made it so much easier for me. My dad was always very supportive of both myself and my sister. At least I didn't have to wonder if he was homophobic or if he would reject me. So any nervousness I had was just about, exposing something personal, not about, the question that so many of us face, so many other people face, which is whether their parents will reject them or not because they're lesbian or gay.
Was your sister out to your dad before you?
No, actually she wasn't. She came out later when she introduced a former partner to the family.
When you reflect on what your dad did, what does it make you think?
Wow, I have so many thoughts about it. I think that it was really brave of him to take the positions that he did and to involve himself. But I also think that in a way he realized that he could do it without threatening his safety because he was straight, he was heterosexual, and he wasn't going to take the risks that a gay or lesbian attorney at that time would have taken. I think he always had a very strong sense of social justice that I'm very grateful he passed on to all of us. And I think he was really motivated by that sense of outrage that people were discriminated against, and he saw it as his role as an attorney to stand up for people who needed legal assistance. And I think his gay rights work was really a part of that.
Do you ever marvel at how committed your dad was to making the world a better place for gay folks without knowing how directly his work would affect his own daughters?
I do. I really do. I would just say that, in addition to my dad's inspiration in his legal career and as a champion for minorities of various kinds and people who needed championing, my dad also just has always been very supportive of me and of my family and my partner and my son. And that means a tremendous amount to me, personally as well.
If you do a search for Herb Selwyn's obituary, you won't find anything beyond his family's paid death notice. Like Edith Ide, who we featured in an earlier episode, Herb's pioneering contributions have been largely forgotten. That's why it gives me special pleasure to tell Herb's story, to let him tell you his story, and to have Jennifer reflect on her father's life and how his selfless actions made a difference in all our lives. Thank you, Jennifer Selwyn, and thanks as always to our crew. Thank you, Sarah Birmingham, Jenna Weiss-Berman, Casey Holford, Jonathan Dozier-Ezel, Zachary Seltzer, and Will Coley. Our theme music was composed by Fritz Myers. Making Gay History is a co-production of Pineapple Street Media with assistance from the New York Public Library's Manuscripts and Archives Division and the One Archives Foundation. Season 2 of this podcast is made possible with support from the Ford Foundation, which is on the front lines of social change worldwide. And if you like what you've heard, please subscribe to Making Gay History on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. So long, until next time.